And final interview to squeeze in here on Morning Live. Now, the United Nations Population Fund says that every year, millions of girls are subjected to practices that harm them physically and emotionally with the full knowledge and consent of their families, friends and communities. Now, the State of World Population 2020 report says that violence and violations against women and children, including boys, have been compounded by the global COVID-19 pandemic, which threatens progress in ending some of these harmful practices. Now, to tell us more about this, we're joined by the UNFPA Representative in South Africa, Beatrice Mutali. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Good morning and thanks for having me.
Ms. Mutali, if we could perhaps just start by taking a look at some of the key findings in the World Report 2020.
Thank you very much. Yes, as you said, we are launching our 2020 State of the World Population Report, which for us is a great report. It's titled Against My Will. And as you rightly say, it is a report that reaches globally girls and that they are a means of controlling their bodies and sexuality. It identifies at least 19 harmful practices that are rampant globally, but then it narrows down on at least 3, which it describes as stubbornly rampant, because they have been globally, they've been difficult to overcome. And the 3 are female genital mutilation, child marriage, and son preference. But the report itself goes on, while it goes on to describe all these harmful practices, it does explain that in many cases, as you said, that a lot of these harmful practices are undertaken with the full knowledge of the parents, of families, of communities, and sometimes parents actually subject their girls to the harmful practices with the best intentions, not recognizing or not knowing the harm, the psychological and physical harm that these practices impose on the young girls. So the report itself is really stresses on the need for us to defy the practices that harm women and girls and undermine equality. It also talks about the fact that many of these harmful practices, while they vary in terms of magnitude and specifics, as you move across the world, they have one thing in common, and the one thing in common they have is that they are all grounded on the facts of inequality, that women and girls are treated are unequal, and that these harmful practices are imposed mainly to control their sexualities and their bodies. So that is actually the whole purpose of the report on the report, which is entitled Against My Will.
So harrowing detail around some of those issues that you've mentioned, particularly female genital mutilation, child marriages and extreme bias against daughters in favor of sons. Where then, Ms. Mutali, geographically, are we seeing most of these violations take place?
I think violations, we do have a lot of them taking place in Africa, across Africa. I think South Africa is one of those countries that would say is fortunate, because if you look at the 90 that are listed, I guess the main thing in South Africa is gender-based violence. But outside of South Africa, you have many of these. You have child marriage quite rampant in many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. You have female genital mutilation taken across a lot of sub-Saharan Africa, particularly countries in West and Central Africa. And then when it comes to son preference, a lot of that has been seen in the Asian countries. There were countries like the Republic of Korea, although it has now changed. There were countries like Tunisia, but again within the report it says that while these practices have taken place in some of those countries, the governments, with the government enactment of laws and engaging communities, they have been able to change them. In the Kingdom of Korea, for example, they've managed to overcome the issue of son preference. In Tunisia, they've been able to do that. And in that, they've actually been able to save many, many girls' lives. Because what happens when you have a situation of son preference is that it fuels trafficking. You end up with a situation where you have more men than women in the community, and that then fuels female trafficking and gender-based violence. And you end up with a situation where young men do not have enough. All that has, in some countries, it has changed. And that's the message within the report, that while they are, in some countries, they still remain main challenges. The fact that countries have been able to change them really points to the fact that with appropriate engagement of communities, with the commitments of governments to enact the laws, it is possible to overcome them.
Well, we are unfortunately out of time, but a very important issue that we have to raise awareness around, and I'm sure you will be doing many more interviews highlighting more of those details. But thank you so much to the United Nations Population Fund representative in South Africa, Beatrice Mutali, for talking to us about their State of the World Population 2020 report, which states that violations against women, girls and boys has been compounded by the global COVID-19 pandemic as it threatens to thwart progress in ending harmful practices. So that's it for